Not always with announcement. Not always with explanation. But with purpose. To more distant areas of the palace. Far from the main halls. Far from influence. Far from visibility. These areas weren't always official prisons. But they felt like them. Because once there, return was uncertain. Some concubines lived out their lives in these quiet sections. Maintained, but no longer involved. Others faced stricter conditions, depending on the situation. And in some cases, records simply stopped mentioning them, as if they had faded from the system itself. Because in the imperial court, punishment didn't always mean visible suffering. Sometimes, it meant removal, a silent transition from presence to absence. And once that happened, very few found their way back. Behind the grand halls of the Forbidden City, control was constant, not always visible, but always present. For concubines, life was shaped by rules. Where they could go, who they could speak to, what they could say. Even small actions were observed. Because the palace wasn't just a residence. It was a controlled environment. And once a concubine lost favor, that control tightened. Movement became restricted. Contact became limited. And communication was reduced to almost nothing. Isolation wasn't always physical at first. It was gradual, subtle. Conversations stopped. Invitations disappeared. Presence faded. Until eventually, they were alone. And in that silence, time changed. Days became repetitive. Moments stresha. Without purpose. Without direction. Some tried to adapt. Creating routines. Holding on to small pieces of identity. Others struggled. Because the absence of interaction can be as heavy as confinement. In a place where identity was tied to status. Losing both meant something deeper. Not just isolation, but disconnection from the system. Inside the Forbidden City, power didn't just decide who ruled. It decided who mattered. Hundreds of women lived behind these walls. Chosen, controlled, watched. Some rose to influence. Others disappeared. Not executed. Not exiled. But removed. Silently. Completely. Because in the imperial court, losing favor wasn't just rejection. It could mean a life. Erased. Inside the Forbidden City, the emperor's household was not simple. Inside the Forbidden City, gaining attention was difficult. But losing it could happen instantly. A rumor. A mistake. A shift in the emperor's interest. Or simply, time. Because new concubines were always arriving. Younger. More noticeable. And in a system built on hierarchy. Attention rarely stayed in one place. For those who lost favor, the change was immediate. Access was reduced. Opportunities disappeared. Rooms became quieter. Interactions became fewer. And slowly, they were moved. It was structured, organized, and strictly controlled. Concubines were selected from across the empire. Some from noble families. Others chosen for beauty or talent. But once they entered the palace, their lives changed completely. They became part of a system. A hierarchy with ranks, rules, and expectations. Every action was monitored. Every interaction observed. Because within the palace, attention was everything. Higher-ranked concubines had influence, access to the emperor, a voice within the court. Lower-ranked ones lived in the background, waiting, hoping to be noticed. But this wasn't just competition. It was survival, because gaining favor could elevate a family's status. But losing it could do the opposite. And in a place where power was absolute, there were consequences. Not always public. Not always recorded, but understood by everyone inside. Because when a concubine fell out of favor, her life didn't just change. It could disappear from the system entirely. from influence, from recognition. And once that connection was gone, very little remained. Because in the imperial court, silence wasn't accidental. It was part of the structure, a way to maintain control, without needing to show it. Inside the Forbidden City, not all punishments were visible. There were no public displays, no crowds, no announcements. Because the imperial court didn't need spectacle. It relied on control, and that control was precise. For some concubines, punishment meant restriction, limited movement, reduced privileges, fewer servants, less access to resources. Life became smaller, more confined. For others, it meant relocation to distant, quieter sections of the palace, places far removed from influence, where activity slowed and attention disappeared. These areas weren't always formal prisons, but the effect was similar: isolation, routine, silence. In more serious cases, records suggest stricter outcomes: demotion in rank, complete removal from court life, and sometimes transfer out of the palace entirely. But what made these punishments powerful wasn't just what happened. It was how quietly they happened. No public acknowledgement, no clear explanation, just change, sudden and irreversible. Because within the system, authority didn't need to justify itself. It simply acted, and everyone else adapted, watched, and learned. Because the message was clear. Position could be gained, but it could also be taken away, without warning, without resistance. And once it was gone, very little could bring it back. The Forbidden City remains one of the most studied places in imperial history. Its structure is documented. Its systems are analyzed. But not everything is fully understood. Especially when it comes to the lives of concubines. Records exist, but they are incomplete, selective, focused more on power than on individuals. Many stories were never written down, or were recorded only briefly, without detail, without context. And over time, those gaps remained. Historians try to reconstruct what happened, using fragments, comparing sources, interpreting patterns. But without full records, some questions remain unanswered. How many were truly sent into isolation? What were their daily lives like? How often did anyone return? We don't always know. And that uncertainty shapes the story today. Because what survives in history is often only part of the truth, the official version, the structured narrative. But behind that, there were real experiences. Quiet ones, unrecorded ones, and those are the hardest to fully understand, because they existed in silence, and in systems designed not to be questioned. So when we look back, we don't just see power, we see gaps, spaces where stories should be, but aren't. And sometimes, those missing pieces say more than anything else.